Hi, I'm Lydia Gilman, and welcome to the Step into Purpose podcast. In this episode, we continue with Darci Hawxhurst's story in part 2 of Surviving to Thriving Through Adversity. And in last week's episode, Darci shared her story of how she found herself in college, pregnant and single, and made the huge decision to become a single mother and give birth to this beautiful baby girl. And once she did, she found when the baby was 12 days old that she was really sick and running a huge fever. So she rushed her to hospital in the middle of the night, where it was discovered that the baby, Haley, was suffering from bacterial meningitis, which is a gravely serious illness, especially for a 12-day-old baby. Most don't come through that, but amazingly, Haley did. Although she did suffer some really serious brain damage. And really, this is the story of Darci's pioneering journey, her refusal to believe the health professionals who told her that this was the way it would be, and that this was who Haley would be for the rest of her life. And Darci refused to believe that. And she really went on a different journey where she refused to heavily medicate Haley so that she was sedated, and instead helped to really heal Haley's brain. And today Haley is a fully functioning independent young adult at college. So this is such an inspiring story, and I just love that Darci is continuing this mission by now sharing her story far and wide to give hope to other parents who might have children who have serious brain damage and not knowing that there is another way and that there is a way to heal that. So please enjoy this episode and share it with anyone who you think might benefit from it.
Haley came with all these different labels, and just attacking the labels, that's the symptom level. And if we don't get to the root of the problem, we have no hope of really changing it. So at the time that we were doing this work, the world for brain injured children was not a good one. I mean, we felt like birdies in a badminton game before we found this root cause paradigm shifting treatment, because there was an expert for every single one of those different labels and for every single one of those different symptoms. And just because they kept records in a fairly consolidated way doesn't mean they ever talked to each other or consulted with each other. So we were just bounced all over the place. And I see it with, I've been a teacher for a long time too. And I see it with students. They get these labels and then they get attached to the labels, and their parents get attached to the labels, and then we're very stuck. Yeah. And it has gotten better in terms of society being more, I guess I want to say, conscientious and more compassionate about making sure, for example, that children on the autism spectrum have things like sensory night at the movies or at the zoo. We know a lot of those children are hypersensitive to both auditory and visual stimulation, and that makes the world a very chaotic place for them, sometimes even a painful place for them. Haley had a lot of auditory hypersensitivity. And I guess I'm so glad we've come far enough to at least recognize that that's going on, so that these children are not treated as lazy, crazy, or stupid. They really are seen as having what we call now neurodiversity. But I am a little disappointed, Lydia, that we've stalled there, because the truth is, yes, if we love those children, we should recognize what their problem is. And yes, if we love those children, we should definitely just respect them for who they are and do everything in our power to set up the environment to be more comfortable for them. But to stop there is not enough, in my opinion. If we love those children, why don't we continue to move forward and address the root cause? In other words, why talk to them about changing their behavior? Why do we have applied behavior programs if you could hear the sound of the water running in the pipes, and if the echo of the flushing toilet in the public bathroom or the balls bouncing in a public gym, if you could hear those things the way those children do, you would not sit still in those rooms either.
Yeah.
Let me just give you a quick example, because we've been able to help Haley's brain organize so that she says to me, sitting in a room studying, like in our kitchen or dining room, reading these college textbooks, and I walk in and start banging around doing dishes, and she'll look at me and kind of laugh. and say, you know what, Mom? I say, what? She's like, you remember when I couldn't even handle that? I'm like, yeah, I remember. She would have to start over every sentence or two because she was so easily distracted by sounds. And one day she looked up and said to me, you know what, Mommy? What, honey? I don't hear the water running anymore. Water running? There is no water running. She's like, yeah, in the walls. What?
Wow.
She said, yeah, I don't hear my heart beeping anymore either. Like it just occurred to her that her midbrain was now mature enough to properly adjust the volume of background sounds so that they weren't coming in at this terribly distracting high volume all the time. So I look at those kids that are on these behavior programs, and the boy in the gymnasium when I was at the Y this morning was, he was in trouble. He was supposed to, stay where he's supposed to be. Well, the sounds in that gymnasium are not comfortable for him. And he's doing the only thing that makes sense, which is to leave that darn room.
Yeah.
And we want to focus on his behavior and making him follow rules and stay with the group and all. We're just focused in the wrong place. Frustrating for me. Yeah.
It's very frustrating. And, they're kind of showing us the way.
Yes.
We live in such a, chaotic world, and it's far too noisy, and we're just all in sort of overdrive, coping with it, bouncing all these noises and deflecting them. But really, they're the superheroes. They can hear the sounds from however far away, and they're kind of showing us the way that it's like, no, it's not all right to be living in this chaos. We need to go back to basics where we have a quieter world where we can be sensitive and feel into what we really are. So it's like, because I think it's so much more prevalent now than it ever was. I mean, that neurodiversity is just everywhere now. And I don't, we might think that people are just sort of banged into shape, like, come on, just deal with it sort of thing. And there might have been a little bit of that as well. And I know I was a really anxious, I was an empath and really anxious as a child. And I was probably highly traumatized as well. And you just learn to live with it, and you think something's wrong with you. And then it takes lots of years of processing and peeling back the onion layers to get back to center again. And I think there are a lot of people who are like that, but the real extreme, people who are actually more on the spectrum, it's a lot more common now, but I think they're showing us the way, they're being delivered to us because they're teaching us that this is a crazy world, and we need to really pare it back and get back to what it's really meant to be about. It's just so noisy, isn't it?
It is so noisy, and they do come with this wisdom. I think that's what I learned so much through this journey with my daughter, is to listen to her and to trust her.
Yes.
And if something's not right, she's telling me, she's showing me, she's trying to explain with whatever means she has to explain it. And we so often think that our adult thinking and our adult perspective is the right way, and that the children need to conform to us, when the truth is, yeah, there is something going on. And in the year that she was born, it was pretty well known that at least 3 out of 10 children were going to have some kind of a neurological issue, whether that be severe, like cerebral palsy or autism, or whether it was going to be more mild, like a learning disability. Those numbers have continued to climb. By 2030, I think we're expected to see some 25% of our children on the spectrum. And this is, maybe, I don't know. I can't speak for whether this is, an evolution of consciousness and where they're leading us. But I do know this, that so much of what happens in the brain depends on what our brains are being made of. And this is our food and our nutrition. And you have to think about what soil is that food being grown in, and that there's glyphosate in 70% of our drinking water and 75% of our air. And, I don't know if you know glyphosate, it's also known in the US as Roundup, and it's a chemical that's sprayed on it's used as a desiccant for raising grain products, and it's got multiple uses
Yeah.
and it's everywhere, and it's disrupting our amino acid profiles, so we don't have, the proper neurotransmitters for our brains, and the proper absorption of proteins through leaky gut issues, and so at the same time we're disrespecting our children and what their true needs are. We're creating a world in which it's very difficult for them to thrive. And I think this, for me, is one of the most heartbreaking, and that's why I'm so passionate about this. The work that I do now and what I teach both parents of children when I work with them, and the women that I work with in my Vibrant Woman program, the very first step in all of the work that I'm doing is to learn more about nutrition, because we are literally making our bodies and brains, and nowhere is this more important than in developing children. And I had the extreme good fortune to have to learn about this thanks to Haley, and the extreme good fortune to watch it pay off for us.
Yeah.
Eating real food, it's subtle, but very, very powerful. Do not underestimate the power of this.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I know it is a challenge in the United States. Companies making profits, like with the example with the breast milk, it's free. It's the absolute best food for your child. But this formula has been pushed, especially in the US, in hospitals. They're promoting formula. And I'm so glad that these things seem to be changing, and that breast milk is promoted. But for so long, it's sort of money is king, and these big companies get to have their products and pride of place in the supermarkets and stuff because it's profitable, and that's what it comes down to. But also, I mean, sugar being in almost every product in the supermarket in the United States. I mean, I couldn't believe that the bread tasted sweet when I've visited there. In peanut butter, they add sugar. Just places where you don't need sugar, it's added because it's cheap and it's a filler. And it's addictive, quite frankly. It makes things taste good and you want more. And your kid will say, oh, please get more of that. They'll only eat that because it's tastier,
That's exactly what's happening. Sugar is absolutely addictive. It acts on the brain the exact same way that cocaine does. And once you have had some, you want more. I just literally made a freebie to try to help teach people about why it's so hard to quit sugar and what we need to do. It has nothing to do with willpower. It's absolutely metabolic. And yeah, these big companies, they know exactly what they're doing by making all of the foods that are marketed to children here in the US. I know in other places in the world, this is not legal to do, but we advertise to children products that are processed and full of sugar, and they're hooked. We've got kids, 10-year-olds with type 2 diabetes now.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. And just the obesity problem. I mean, it's just such a disservice. And the fact that, I hear lots of particularly conscious women business owners saying, yeah, the reason I really want to make a lot of money is so that I can shop at Whole Foods. And it's like, the fact that it's so expensive to just buy real food. I mean, it's really a farce, isn't it? That you have to be wealthy to go back to basics and just buy normal, healthy, wholesome food, which will nourish your family. It's crazy.
It is crazy. It is. And I'm not going to disagree with that situation because everything's gone up here too. But, it doesn't have to be more expensive. It doesn't have to break your family. I definitely have tools and tricks that I teach people because this has become literally my number one priority value in my life is to find and only eat real food. Yeah. And, I learned to garden a couple of years ago. So I grow quite a bit of my own now, which pretty hilarious, really. If you look back at the young college student that I was, living out of a box or a bag and a pack of cigarettes, and for the people who knew me then to look and see now, like I only eat if I could grow it. That's the only way I'm eating it.
And it's so satisfying too, though, isn't it? To actually plant something. I love it. Yeah.
It's so fun until the beetles come. And then I'm, because it has to be organic. So I was out picking cabbage worms off and squishing them. Anyway, it's a wonderful, what I say to people is really, we have to learn to eat close to the earth. And for me, that has also been this is why this is such a part of the journey for me. And something that I'm so deeply grateful for is that it has put me in touch with really, what does it mean to just live in a human body?
Yeah.
We are not like nature, Lydia.
Yeah.
We are nature. These bodies and bones, the way our blood flows, the way our circadian rhythm works, is because for millennia, we evolved right here on this earth with these plants, with the local flora and fauna, with the sunshine every day, creating certain rhythms and patterns and hormone cycles, starting with our brain. And so it really has given me this beautiful opportunity. I did it to save my daughter's life, but I have learned just the beautiful piece of being a healthy human in a vibrant body. I just wouldn't trade it for anything in the world.
And you look amazing, and you've got that radiance, from eating good food. I mean, it definitely comes with a glow, doesn't it? When you eat wholesome, good food, and you are ageless.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's really, you're a testament to exactly what you're talking about. And it's
so kind of you.
Yeah, no, it's so true. And I just want to go back to the piece with the neuroplasticity and things. And we all know that our brains, we use such a tiny amount of our brains. So really, in working with Hayley, are they building new pathways and just getting that? Because I'm thinking, if people are listening to this, and they do have children with brain injuries or whatever, what would you suggest they do? Because I think it's so important.
Absolutely. Well, I want to answer your question, but I want to say this first. Number one, if you have a child whose neurological development is concerning to you, then I absolutely want you to reach out to me. So I'm happy to point people toward the program that I recommend that we used, and I actually have a discount that I can offer people, a referral discount. So come and talk with me, and I do free discovery calls, and I'm happy to listen to your story and put the resources in your hand, and then, put you on the path. Okay. So that's definitely possible. And that's true if your child has any of these labels: autism, ADHD, cerebral palsy, learning disorders, dyslexia, global or gross developmental delays, whether that's fine or gross motor. So I think there's a bunch of new labels too since Hayley. So one of her symptoms of her brain injury was epilepsy. So if your child has seizures, learning problems, slow in any way, I just want you to consider that's all rooted in the brain. And so, yes, the brain can grow and heal. And so here's what we were taught. I worked with the late, great Glenn Doman, who was the pioneer in child brain development. And what made him so special, him and his team, they called themselves searchers, not researchers, because they truly were asking questions. Science is nothing if it's not a system of questions and answers. You can only get answers that you're asking the questions for, right? You're not going to get an answer, because even if you get an answer to a question you didn't ask, you don't hear it. It doesn't land for you. You can't do anything with that. So they were the first people really to come along. And instead of asking, how do we help these kids learn to live with these problems, they were asking, how do we help these kids outgrow these problems? Yeah. So it is everything. What they taught is that the brain grows by use, and that stimulation and opportunity are the basic system of brain growth. So, of course, it gets more complicated than just that basic input and output. We all know a bit about that. We liken the brain to a computer. You don't expect anything to come out of a computer that you haven't put in. But what we're assuming is that the computer has all the right wiring because we built that. And so now we've got a brain with some wiring that's missing, because my daughter's situation, there's an infection that stopped blood flow to those areas for a while. Or if someone was in a car accident, like someone has had, a traumatic brain injury or an event that caused part of that brain to be hurt. Now what? Well, the old thinking was that that's gone. And the new thinking is there are billions and trillions of brain cells that need a job, and they know how to connect with each other. So we have to provide a program of stimulation, and that includes nutrition and oxygenation and good organized movement. We have to help the brain grow through its different stages of development. And so it's totally doable to create healing in a brain that's been hurt. And here's the thing I also want to say is that we were very, very lucky, because we knew Haley had that brain injury. I stood in the hall with those doctors in those white coats, and they pointed to the map and they showed me which bridges were out for her, right? But there are lots of children who have they present very similarly on a clinical level. In other words, they have the same problems, but nobody knows exactly what happened to cause those problems. That's where it gets a little trickier, because a lot of parents are just told that's how your child is, that's your child. And they don't even know that it could be different if we were to do a program of neurological organization that helps that brain to heal and grow. Because yes, there are neurons. Now they need to connect with each other. The brain is 63% fat. Where does that fat come from? You have to put it in your mouth, So it had the building blocks have to come in.
Wow.
So, right. Here's an example, the electricity that runs through your house, through the walls, that's all well insulated, right?
Yeah.
That's what allows those electrical impulses to go where they go and to go quickly. When you flip the switch, the light goes on. Yeah. That's a very well insulated electrical pathway. The same thing happens in the brain. But what if you don't have proper fat intake? What if that electrical impulse kind of slips out and goes some other places?
Wow.
What if it takes a minute for that impulse to get there? That light doesn't come on right away. Well, so this begins to explain why we see what we see in kids who are struggling to learn, read, remember, to run, creep, crawl, whatever it is they're slow at. We just need to make sure that the brain has what it needs to operate efficiently. And so, yes, it's doable. I'll admit it was a lot of work. It was, 10-hour days for weeks at a time, years in a row to make this happen. And yet, if you knew that was what it took for your child to be able to one day be an independent adult with the life of their choosing, how could I not do that?
You can't not do that, can you? You can't. It's not an option. And my gosh, what an undertaking, and what a result, what a victory you've achieved. I mean, you're just so alive and lit up, It's amazing. You took the calling, you took this huge ask of you, and you've done it. It's amazing. And now I understand what you're saying. Can I just take a rest now? Can I just retire? But you can't because it's in you and the fire is lit, and to put it out would be much more effort than just keeping it burning and feeding the world with this knowledge. It's amazing.
Right, because I'll take your compliment for half a minute, but then I just have to say this. It's because I see those kids out there. Yeah. There's a boy I met the other day who used to have seizures as a child, and his parents, did the 4 medications and then the 8. Now he's on 10 medications, and he's sedated pretty much out of any ability, any cortical ability he was ever going to have. And I look at him and my heart just, it explodes with love and respect and empathy for his mother, because I've lived with that fear. And I understand the fear that the mainstream physicians can put in us too, that if I had a doctor tell me once that if I did not give these medicines to my daughter, that I should not be able to have custody of her, that I was an unfit mother if I did not follow her treatment protocol. Not to mention the fear of what else bad could happen, if we allow this to continue. So my heart swells, but I look at that boy and my heart breaks. And all I could think to myself was that was never going to be my kid.
It's a spirit, a soul. The mind is just our servant, we are not the mind. It's a beautiful spirit trapped in this human body, which is controlled by a broken mind, which can be fixed and can be healed. It's enormous, isn't it? And the fact that you see that, and you see now your beautiful soul of a daughter who had the singing and that joyous singing. I mean, it's really the whole story. It's such a captivating book. So I'm so glad that you're writing this book. But it's amazing, isn't it? You've really followed that hero's journey.
Yeah, I have to tell you this one last thing. Haley's name means heroine full of grace. And I named her that before I had any idea what kind of a hero's journey she was going to take herself on and take me on. But I do know now that that journey can't have been just for us. And so if I don't tell this story, if I don't reach those mothers who have the same feeling I did, that maybe these medications aren't safe and maybe this isn't the long-term solution, because I think, what might they do? What might they try if they thought it were possible?
Yeah.
So let me just say this. I'm going to say this to my past self sitting on that sofa feeling so alone and hopeless. And I'm going to say this to you out there. If you are out there and you can hear me, it's possible. Give it a try.
Yeah. And what do you have to lose? I mean, that's the thing, because caring for a child with, with these disabilities, and that's a lifetime. But if you're putting the work in, and it takes a heck of a lot of work, whereas if you're putting that work in to heal them, you're going to be putting that work in anyway and caring for them for their life, so do the best for them, do what works. But it really is heartbreaking that the medical system puts so much fear in us, and they do that in so many different ways. But I'd like to think it's changing, but it doesn't sound like it is really. It's slow.
It is slow. And let me just say this to all the moms out there too. Like, if you have a doctor like that, like I did, the only reasonable response to that was for me to thank her very kindly and leave that room with my child. Yeah. So just because there are some professionals out there like that doesn't mean that they all are. No. So yeah, you just always have to trust yourself and
trust your gut. And the science is proving, and your story, people coming out with these stories, is proving that it's possible, and the science is backing it up. So thank you for your gift to the world. I mean, it's enormous for you, just taking that baton and running with it and moving forward. It's really made such a difference to the world. So we'll wind up and we'll share all your links so people can really find you if they need to find you, because this is vital, and you're a real lifeline for people who need this information. So we'll share all those. But before we go, I mean, we've kind of talked about it, but what does it mean to you to live your purpose? And this is a bigger purpose than so many of us have. I mean, it's enormous, but yeah, what does it really mean?
Well, I think what's fascinating is that honestly, it continues to evolve, doesn't it? Yeah. I mean, at first my purpose was to freaking get that baby born. I mean, I was only in labor for 23 hours, right? That was my purpose, right? And then my purpose, was to get her to the hospital on time, right? And then my purpose was to stay awake by her side. And then my purpose was to creep and crawl with her. And then my purpose was to find better food. Yeah. And that was for her, yes, but that was for me because this has made me who I am. So for me, what it means to live my purpose is really to just do whatever you have to do, what life is asking of you in the moment.
Yes.
It's so not glamorous. It's so not sexy. I hated certain moments of that. I just wanted to be done with that journey. But I can see now really how it was a gift and how it made me who I am. And I really couldn't trade it. So living my purpose has just meant living from that place of instinct in every moment and trusting it.
Yeah. And it's like what you said, as those steps light up, you just take them, and if you're tuned into that, life becomes easy. Well, it's not easy because they're challenging steps, but you just have to follow it, and it'll be okay, and it's the right thing. It takes out that equation of, shall I do this or shall I do that? It's very clear if you tune in and you follow it.
Well, because now my purpose is just to keep telling the story to everybody who will listen. So I want to thank you for this opportunity to share. I appreciate you so much.
Oh, I appreciate you so much and doing this work. I mean, you are such a light, and you're ageless, and you'll be doing this. I know you'll be doing this for the rest of your life because you're following your heart, and this is such important work. But hopefully you get some rest and time to yourself as well, where you can just be, because it's a lot, isn't it? It's an ongoing, fight, really.
It is. I'm going to need some beach time. I might have to come see you.
Go live by the beach and do your work. You get Wi-Fi everywhere now. Oh, well, thank you so much. So just let us know where people can find you, and I'll link them up to the show notes below. But you've got a book coming out as well, which you're writing. I'm so happy that you've got this book, because it just keeps the conversation going, and it keeps it relevant all the time, because books are evergreen, and people can just find it. So
it's true. I think I have to really get the book done, because the truth is, talk about living our purpose and what's next. I mean, if there's ever a day I get tired of telling the story, at least I'll have it written down by then, right? So I can do something else. The book will be finished soon. And the people to know about that first will be people on my free newsletter list. And you can find all of that, including some of the story that I started to write about Haley's journey from brain injured to business school. That's on my blog. And that all of that work lives on my website, which is darcihawxhurst.com. And it's DarciHawxhurst.com.
And you've got it also in the pipeline. You're looking at a podcast as well to really explore these conversations. You've got a lot on your to-do list, but thank you for keeping the journey going and keeping this vitally important subject alive, because it's so important. I mean, a lot of people could think, well, I'm okay now, my daughter's well, and just leave it at that. But like you said, that you can't not share this.
That's right. Because now, it's just the right thing for my heart to do that for other mamas out there and other kiddos. So you're so loved and you're so appreciated in this world. So thank you so much. Thank you, Lydia.
Isn't Darci so inspiring? Even as I was editing this conversation, I found myself feeling so lit up and inspired and smiling to myself, rewatching the conversation, because she just has such an uplifting enthusiasm and magnetism. So please share this episode with anyone who you think might benefit from it. If you have anyone who is struggling possibly with brain injured children, or just anyone who you think might be inspired by Darci's story, please share it. And if you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel. Or if you're listening to this on the podcast, please rate and review, because this really helps us get the message out there and share the goodness. Thank you so much for listening.